Hey everyone, Margarita here. This is episode 12 of my severe carbon monoxide poisoning, which initially went untreated for quite some time. And in this video, I want to go over a bunch of the symptoms that accompany a any carbon monoxide poisoning, especially a severe one, whether that be repeated chronic low-level exposures, one acute large exposure, intermittent exposures, a mix of these, because it can happen many different ways. And these symptoms can appear with any of those types of exposures. Also in utero as well, or in a young child, because I am dealing with that at the same time. So I'm going to go over some of what I experienced, and there is way more than just what I experienced. I just want to name a bunch of them off. I do want to mention, after that memo came out that I read in the last video, that shortly after that, I removed myself from the building after making several phone calls to workers' comp, a couple workers' comp attorneys, how all of this works, especially when I'm normally self-employed. This was only a temporary employer, and they had basically taken me out for the rest of my life. And I at this point, I couldn't receive any type of legal help. Nobody was understanding the severity of the situation because I was not in a hospital. And I did not know about all of the obstruction of justice, the crimes that my mother was involved in making sure we did not receive treatment once we were overloaded and it was an extreme emergency. There was all these factors I was unaware of at that time. But I did remove myself, is what happened shortly after that, after gathering a little bit more information. And I didn't have a choice because I realized I wasn't going to live. So I had no choice but to remove myself and lay at home and do nothing. And I did that for months on end. I could not do anything literally except for try to keep my son and I alive. So that went on for quite some time. But I do want to get into some of these symptoms in case somebody out there is experiencing this and they're just Googling around for, they think they might have carbon monoxide poisoning, or their loved one might have carbon monoxide poisoning, or someone they know, or someone they work with, or is it in the building where they work with? Is it in their home? Where is the source? But I will start with the symptoms. And usually if someone is Googling that stuff, it's because they're experiencing some pretty significant symptoms and they're very confused and they can't find the help they're looking for. Even if they've been to the hospital or doctor and have been told that nothing's wrong or it's not carbon monoxide, that does not mean that that is the case, because the way the medical system checks for it is false. They are not going to find it in 80 to 90% of the cases. So if you're Googling carbon monoxide poisoning and you find this video, or you're Googling the symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, or severe symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, or ongoing symptoms that don't stop, and you think it's carbon monoxide, because there is nothing out there that causes symptoms to be ongoing in that extreme manner with no relief whatsoever for years on end. In my case, it was years on end with no relief. Some people, it can be days, weeks, or months. But I do have a very extreme case of this because I think in total I figured out that I was in there about 1,700 hours worth of carbon monoxide of an unknown amount, different amounts throughout that, but an unknown amount. Plus all the little re-exposures I'd had along the way. So by the time I overloaded, I was so done for. But I do want to get this information out about the symptoms. If you find this video, if you are having a number of these symptoms that I'm naming off, especially if it is accompanied by brain swelling or a massive headache, periods of unconsciousness, and possibly quite a bit of nausea or diarrhea or vomiting, and a lot of confusion. Those are the biggest. If all of that's going on, or most of those are going on, that is a huge red flag that it is carbon monoxide. You need to start figuring out the source. So I will get into a different video on the sources. But the biggest thing is your brain hurts. Your brain is burnt. It's burnt to a crisp. It hurts really bad. Some people call it migraine. It can be brain swelling, or just your brain is pressed against your skull with no relief, ongoing. That is the biggest factor right there, plus the extreme confusion. So now, within the blood work, I would say, like I said, the carbon monoxide a lot of times does not show, but what it will show is that you're anemic, you're low on potassium, you have high blood sugar, high blood pressure. Basically everything within the blood work is skewed in some manner, either too high or too low in some direction or another. And the carboxyhemoglobin, the carbon monoxide that they're testing for, shows like a normal amount. So that is a big red flag. That just means a high level was not detected in your blood in that moment. It does not mean you don't have carbon monoxide poisoning. A lot of the times, the symptoms do not correlate with the blood work. So that's one really big red flag as well. It does cause severe body aches and pains, joint pain, swelling everywhere in the body or in certain places, especially old injuries. Because I was pregnant during this, I became unable to process the water that I was drinking. I couldn't even process water. It was building up under my skin and my entire body. Even in my tongue, my mouth, everything. I had to take my tongue ring out. I couldn't even talk. On top of the ability to, like how I lost communication, on top of that. So that was an issue. I put daily headache, but it's a continuous, constant toxic headache is what it, constant migraine, toxic headache. If it has broken through the brain, now you have a brain injury. Because if it was just pressed against your skull and then you have like in and out of consciousness or periods of unconsciousness and you wake up and it feels different, like there's inches of space. If you were having a brain swelling episode, then that would be a brain injury secondary to the carbon monoxide poisoning. That means it has broken through the blood-brain barrier. And I intend to go on a whole other set of videos just on the blood-brain barrier alone down the line. I will get to all of that because that is a very important role in all this and many other issues out in the world. So I am going to do quite a bit of videos on that when I get to that point. Now, like I said, the severe brain swelling, headache, whatever, that is the biggest red flag, especially when it goes on for more than 2 days. You end up in a continuous state of fatigue, and you end up fragile. Like if your system completely overloads like mine did and it broke through the brain, that carbon monoxide floods your entire system. It floods every cell in your body. So every cell becomes overloaded with the carbon monoxide, and it makes every cell in your body fragile, especially your brain. So you feel like you're on the verge of continuously shaking, and if one wrong sound is made, or if someone's trying to argue with you, or anything, you just start shaking because every cell is so fragile and overloaded. You're so sick it has to be removed that you literally just start shaking. You're shaking because you're so overloaded and fragile. That is the result of that. And it looks like a mental disorder, especially when you're trying to tell somebody what's wrong with you. And then in my case, I had a deranged lunatic in the background telling them I'd always had a mental disorder, which had never even been true. And since she was their employee with their badge hanging from her neck, they believed everything she was saying, claiming to be my mother. No one knew we had no contact. None of that stuff was real. I'd never been diagnosed with a mental disorder. But when you're in that type of state and you're that overloaded with carbon monoxide and you're shaking and your brain is broken and you've lost the ability to communicate, it does appear as if someone has a mental disorder, not that they're in extreme distress, need help with communication, and have had a brain injury and carbon monoxide poisoning, and the symptoms are continuous. So you can't really explain that when you're in that state due to the brain injury and what's been disrupted within the brain and the communication skills and whatnot. Even you can be trying your hardest and the other person is not going to understand, and they really look at you like you have a brain injury. And I'd say 99% of the time they will kick you right out of the facility, document you have a brain injury, and tell you there's nothing wrong, go home. So that is another big issue. I stayed in that fragile manner for a very long time before there was ever one day of relief from that. And even then, it was not smooth sailing from there. Like I said, I've had many re-injuries, re-exposures, which had also caused, setbacks in that where I'd become more fragile again after becoming a significant portion healed. So as your system loads up with each re-injury or re-exposure, you goes backwards and experience more symptoms. So that does happen as well. The injury will control every moment of your life. It controls, if you are not getting medical treatment, especially if you're not getting medical treatment, it will control every moment of your life for as long as it's going on that extreme, which can be years. In my situation, it was years. It was about 5 years that it was controlling every aspect of my life. So it will control every aspect of your life because you cannot go places. You're in an extreme state of emergency. You can't get from room to room. You can't stand up. You can't communicate with people. It affects every single part of your life. Can't make appointments, can't even get to the grocery store, can't even travel from point A to point B. It will control every portion, every second of your life until you figure out how to get treatment, how to get some of this stuff removed from your system. It will stay that way. And now I will get into several other sets of videos on how to start removing some of this from your system if this is what you're experiencing. I had a complete loss of words for years on end trying to deliver information. Really, my brain is extremely injured in this manner. And what I'll do is I'll draw a diagram of like the interior half of the brain, and I will draw where the knots of carbon monoxide was within my brain and what was actually going on, because I can draw it on paper and show what was actually going on because of the way it felt and how many years it stayed that way before it began to clear. So I can accurately draw that on a piece of paper, because me explaining that to somebody, the other person is not going to understand it. But I will draw it out. I'll use colors and I'll show you what exactly happened and how long that went on for in that manner. You know, the inability to communicate. I basically still need speech therapy, and there's ongoing problems in my home and with all of my children due to the amount of screaming that was going on when I was fighting for my life, unable to communicate properly, just in an extreme fight, no one realizing anything had even happened to me. And my youngest was still learning to talk at this time, so it changed everyone around me's behavior and caused all of this disrespect and behavior, which then ties in with the ongoing crimes in the background of the agencies and what my mother was doing during all of this. So it has a long-term effect on everybody and communication skills, because again, I still need speech therapy to put myself back together how I was prior. And I'm not really sure that that's ever going to happen at this point. So my best bet is to keep treating and removing what is in there, and I seem to be doing a little bit better when that is going on. And as of right now, I've not been treating for a while, so it makes it a little harder for me to talk, deliver messages, deliver information, like breathe while I'm talking, because I'm overloaded with carbon monoxide, so I don't absorb the oxygen properly to be able to talk properly in a proper breath. So that's part of the reason I need speech therapy and stringing sentences back together properly as well. We'll get way more into that later if that ever happens for me. I just struggled along and spiraled to where I am today on my own without help, with people screaming delusions in my face the whole time. So I'll get more back on that in a little bit. Some of the other symptoms you're going to have, you're definitely going to have clumsiness, weakness, even before you overload with carbon monoxide, even if you're just having like some small exposures regularly. That will be some of the early signs. You can have like hallucinogenic waves, like out of the peripheral vision. You start to have problems with peripheral vision in general. You can have black spots, like you can't fully see a full view when looking at anything. You can also have little floating black spots. So there's different types of visual effects that you can experience before you overload, or if you're just getting regularly exposed, or after. I did have some liver pain, and that's because your body's trying to process the toxins that it took in, and your liver is the filter. So charcoal capsules do help with that, activated charcoal capsules. I've taken thousands of them. I still take them to this day. It does make a difference, you know, not a huge difference, but every little thing does kind of help. So I have a whole system of things that I do still to this day, and I will get into that in a different video, but you can expect some liver pain, especially if you're significantly overloaded. You will have some chest tightness because your body is not getting enough oxygen. Your heart's not getting enough oxygen. Your brain's not getting enough oxygen. So then in turn, nothing's really getting enough oxygen. So you will have chest tightness, trouble breathing. You'll have extreme irritability because the oxygen's being cut off from your brain. And that also goes for other neurologic disorders, autism, ADD. I'll get more into that in the future episodes, but you will have extreme irritability that you can't control, and especially if you're not getting treatment and the people around you do not get what's going on, it's going to become 10 to 100 times worse. And I did live in it. It was like living in hell. I was living in a nightmare during that time. You will then probably be diagnosed with anxiety even. And that's not even what that is. What it is your body's not processing oxygen properly. So it looks like you have anxiety because the oxygen is not coming in and going out properly. But anxiety medications would work just to help with the symptoms while all this is going on. especially if you are seeking treatment to try to remove all of this from your system. Eventually, you could probably reach a place where you may not need them anymore or may not need so many. But it is not technically anxiety. It's carbon monoxide poisoning. They're labeling it anxiety. But I did have a personality change. That's another thing. I did mention, all the employees and everybody that I worked with, they noticed I had a significant personality change. I was unable to communicate properly, and I could not joke around, or I just had to say only the bare minimum of what I had to get through the day. I was very short and I don't have the words for it, but it was a definite extreme personality change. So that is another big red flag. If that happens to you, that points to carbon monoxide poisoning. There's not too many things that cause a significant personality change. And that personality change for me was indefinite and never, the person I was before never came back. So I'm going to put a break right there, and I'm going to come back and do another one on some more of these symptoms. Thanks. Bye.